This essay example, as well as thousands of others, is available in text format on our website for free and without registration. Simply Google Ivy Panda Free Essays.
Introduction. Psychological research is often done by developing and testing theories. A theory, on the other hand, is a well-established principle that has been developed to give a reasonable explanation to some worldly phenomenon. Most theories arise from repeated observations, testing, and other scientific facts, laws, and hypotheses. In most cases, the deductive approach is used to generate specified predictions from other general theories. The process through which detailed predictions are drawn concerning the validity of a theory is the testing of a hypothesis. Hypothesis. A hypothesis is a specified concept about a particular concept that can be tested in anticipation of the outcome of the study. For instance, research developed to study the relationship between study habits among students and examination anxiety could have a hypothesis. The study is developed to evaluate the hypothesis that students who studied better experienced less anxiety for examinations. The hypothesis explains what the researcher is expecting as the outcome unless it is explorative. Therefore, the first role of the hypothesis is to present the premise on which the psychological study is based. A well-developed hypothesis in psychology will hence be able to give the researcher direction for the experiment or investigation. The investigator will know which kind of data to collect, the methods to evaluate and measure the data, and how to interpret and draw conclusions. Therefore, the hypothesis in psychological experiences has explanatory power. They also suggest the expected association between the variables under investigation to the researcher. The hypotheses are required to be testable and aligned with the current pool of knowledge about certain concepts and factors. The hypothesis also gives the reader a prelude to an experiment, and therefore, a good hypothesis for psychological study should be simple and concise. A hypothesis provides the psychologist with an uncertain explanation of an observable fact, sparking a feeling of curiosity and inspiring and facilitating the expansion of knowledge in that sector. A hypothesis also gives the investigator a relational statement that scientific methods can test and, therefore, helps to determine the type of study method that will be used for investigations. As the method determines the data collected, the hypothesis also guides reporting the findings and making conclusions. This is because the researcher seeks to accept or reject the hypothesis. And this is often the goal of the research. In psychological studies, hypotheses are generally drawn from the existing knowledge and theories. In this field, hypotheses function as the working instrument of specific theories that need to be proven or need more knowledge in terms of literature or findings. Psychology. Psychology is the science of mental well-being and deals with status and functioning. As a science, psychology is constituted by two essential principles. The first is that there has to be measurement. The hypothesis states the variables to be measured as a second role. This role is vital because in science, before any phenomenon has been subjected to measurement, it cannot attain a standing in dignity as a scientific fact. The second principle is that psychological research should inform and be informed by a number of theories and hypotheses. By having a testable hypothesis, psychological research is made valid as it can be examined. In psychology, two major empirical models of study and two types of hypotheses can be tested. The different approaches deal with different hypotheses. There is the causal hypothesis and the associative hypothesis. Sometimes, the two can be examined together. The causal hypothesis helps a psychologist or a researcher to observe how manipulating some factors affects the outcomes of other variables in the future. The associative hypothesis, on the other hand, investigates the frequency at which certain events happen concurrently. The causal hypothesis, therefore, uses random allocation experimental methods of study. Causal uses random sampling. In general, psychological research revolves around the generation and testing of hypotheses. As hypotheses are speculation, testing them helps develop other theories with integrity. Many studies focus on the methods of testing these hypotheses and dwell less on their generation strategies. The design of the hypothesis determines the methods to be used for testing. Body of knowledge. The more specific the hypothesis in research is, the more intuitive the research will be, therefore, the results will be more actionable. Typically, psychological research hypotheses are developed by a number of means. The common one is inductive reasoning, and in this strategy, the researcher makes some observations that lead to him or her developing a presumption. To conduct the study, the researcher then employs a more extensive battery of deductive methods to create a hypothesis that is falsifiable and practical. Hypotheses help the research to build on the current knowledge in that they form precursors to theories and research problems, which in most cases are questions in research. For instance, asking why students experience anxiety when examinations are going on. The problem question could be framed as, why do students experience anxiety during the examination period? This is a very broad statement that is not testable by research methods. However, it can draw literature views. To look into it, the researcher will have to conduct a literature review and use previously acquired knowledge and intuition to answer it. Intuition is not scientific. A research hypothesis pares down the problem to form a concept that is testable and falsifiable. From the above example, the investigator could see that the anxiety could be caused by students not preparing well for the examinations. A psychologist must create a realistic hypothesis where the experiment will be designed. The researcher will then continue to reference the hypothesis for the thought process and develop solutions to the research problem. Conclusion. Psychologists regularly suggest theories to explain how human beings behave. On a more informal approach, people judge others based on their intentions, motivations, and the cause of certain actions. These subjective and anecdotal opinions are subject to tests. Hypotheses can be developed where these assumptions or perceptions can be tested by scientific methods in an objective and systematic approach. It is pertinent to note that the hypothesis cannot be proved nor disapproved, rather, the investigator accepts or rejects the hypothesis. When the hypothesis is rejected, it leads to the development of another hypothesis which can also be tested. Did you like this The Role of Hypotheses in Psychological Research sample? To get more works like this one, make sure to check out the free database of academic paper examples at ivpanda.com. You will find thousands of samples for all your study needs, without even having to register.